Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Photographer Mindset Podcast. I'm your co-host, Seth Macy.
I'm your co-host, Aaron Manis. Seth, we have a streak now, I think, with people with musical instruments and or amps or
We do have a streak going
right behind them.
Yeah, I'm starting to get convinced that people are just green screening for Aaron because he loves music so much.
Yeah, they're trying to impress. Yeah, yesterday was impressive. That guy had some nice guitars.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, Chris, welcome to the show.
You're welcome.
We are big fans. I don't think you can be in the photography sort of genre on Instagram without being a big fan. And I say that truthfully. We ran into each other on Clubhouse in the Clubhouse days, probably during COVID. I think it was a perfect storm in terms of people wanting to share and talk to people, being locked up at home and being able to talk to people. And Clubhouse works with like rooms, and there can be moderators, and there would be a topic per se, and people would ask questions. But Chris was moderating a few rooms that I happened to be in, maybe even shared a moderation stage. I don't remember. We have mutual friends, Brett Blakely. I think he just saw you in New York City.
Yeah.
But I just remember kind of being blown away by your stories and your willingness to share and spend time with anyone that wanted to listen. For a long time, I've wanted you on the show, and again, kind of surprised and very grateful. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I mean, you've got a big following, you've got a ton of stuff that you're doing, and you responded to my DM. I don't know, within minutes, if not hours, to be like, yeah, man, let's try to set it up. You were waiting for it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes, he finally wrote. Yeah, you've made it now, bud. You're on the show.
I'm grateful. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think that just to throw in my 2 cents, I feel like that idea of connection has been the fundamental keystone for using social media for me. It's always been the point of it. I think back in the day, when there used to be things like Insta meets and stuff like that, where we would get together in person in real time. That was kind of always the point. And I guess nowadays, obviously, that those social media channels have evolved and grown and become totally new things as well. I feel like at the core of it, that's what it's all about. It's about connection. And I feel like that's the exciting thing for me, is being able to connect to people, being able to learn from people, being able to hear their story, engaging within that audience and just trying to, foster those real experiences that can come from those channels.
Yeah. And do you think that is still the case? Do you think we're drifting away from that? Is it hard to still find that? Is it hard to find and feel like that is real? Or do you feel like it's still there? It's just a little noisy.
Yeah. What's funny is that in the grand scheme of things, because of the fact that most people just can't even speak to the audience that they've grown, because just people aren't seeing content these days. You can have millions and millions of followers and you're speaking to like 10% of them. And I'm not here to complain about it at all, because the people that I do have relationships with are super strong and amazing. But I will say that yes, over the years, that used to kind of be this incredible new thing where you'd meet people and it would foster a relationship, and maybe there'd be some trip or expedition or photo shoot or film or something that would come of that. And nowadays it feels like less and less. I think a part of it is just because the connectivity is now of a more pay to play model, as I think everybody knows. And that is a bit frustrating and challenging,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it does seem like anything that you're putting out there, there's kind of like this troll at the bridge that's like, is this for your purpose, or are you paying us to allow this to go through? There's like this stopgate in terms of that. And if anything's just for you or something that you like or a photo that you're proud of, they're like, we're not going to waste anyone's time with that. That's not bringing any bucks in.
It's a complicated narrative. And I also get that, those channels, they aren't owned by us, so we have to appreciate what they offer. And it's, for what it's brought, it's been a really beautiful gift. Like I still look at it as net positive in every way, because it's some of my most meaningful relationships I have now I've met because of social media. So it's a great tool. I think it just depends on how you use it, you know?
Absolutely. And I think gratitude is something we talk about a lot. And Seth did a great reel sort of just pointing out and reminding people, if you were talking to a room of 100 people about your photograph, that looks pretty impressive.
Yeah, 100%.
If you were talking to 1,000 people, let alone, tens of thousands of people, if you sort of think about it versus going like, it used to be tens of thousands, now it's only 1,000 people like my photo. Still though, 1,000 people are looking at your photo, maybe commenting, liking it, and you were able to reach around the world with it.
It's crazy.
For free.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I speak professionally as a career. It's probably one of the most consistent things that I do, like yearly, and that freaks me out every time I get onto a stage, every time I share a story, and there could be anywhere between 20 people to 2,000 or something like that, right? And sometimes those 20 are more scary because it's usually like a room full of CEOs or whatever, and that's fascinating. Like even that, it can be, you think differently about what you're going to say. You're more conscious about the stories. You're kind of like trying to make sure you're hitting all your points, and I mean, if we spent that much time or thoughtfulness on what we shared into the world, I think it'd be a very different situation.
Yeah, no kidding. I had a question for you when I was watching the Forgotten Coast film. In the very first 2 minutes, when you're in the plane looking at the rivers, you talk about, you have this moment where it's a would it be possible moment, or that quote, what if moment that hits you as you're looking down. I think it was pertaining to would it be possible for me to ride my bike across at all these and raft across these? And my question is, when that moment hits you, that what if moment or the would it be possible moment in your brain, how do you continue momentum forward from that point on and execute your vision? I feel so many people fizzle out at that pivotal moment and essentially can stay daydreaming forever.
Man, that's such a good question, to be honest, because I've never been asked that, first of all, but there is a big leap. That idea of like inception of an idea, the dream, whatever you want to call it, that moment, and then getting to like execution, right? It's a big step, right? And I would say that it becomes less romantic than you think. I think that's part of the issue. You have a lot of dreamers out there. There are a lot of dreamers. There's a lot of artists, great artists, better than me artists. But I do think that, not to pat myself on the back, but one of the skill sets I've really had to hone over the years is this idea of, okay, now I got to buckle down and I got to start to plan. And a lot of that looks like staring at Google Earth. It looks like staring at Google Maps. It looks like making a route. I probably started first thing after that flight, because that was a real moment. Like I remember flying and being, what if this was possible? And I had just seen it all with my eyes. And so I felt like I knew the route was possible. So the next thing I did is I went to the computer. I'm starting to build a route on like Ride with GPS or some kind of a GPS routing software, right? Strava, Onyx, whatever. And then I would start to build out a route, and I would start to look at, okay, where's fresh water? Where is food? Where is resupply? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'm kind of wrapping my head around, is this possible? And then I'm trying to think of what would it cost? What are the costs involved? So there's the possibility that check mark has been checked. It's possible, not probable, but it's possible. And then, what is the paycheck that's going to have to go towards this? What is the drop off? Maybe my own personal supplies, the food. If I want to document it, what does that look like? I would have to hire this and that person. They're driving that, I think years of experience plays into this, where I'm starting to think about everything down to like the gas expenses for the car driving and the food for the crew, and knowing that like, oh, okay, for them to film it, it's going to cost me, whatever, $8,000 or something like that. Right. So that's where I really think the rubber hits the road, and the romanticism of being a photographer and executing, like, it kind of goes out the window because you go into full producer mode, which I know both of you are probably very familiar with. And that is a challenging space to be in. You're managing, theoretically, you're managing checkbooks and stuff like that. You're not dreaming up beautiful shots. The toughest part, is having, and this is kind of the backside of that question, is like, you then have to kind of, I guess you could say, reverse engineer the process to then be creative again. So you've done all the checks and balances, boom, 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 boom. You got the crew set up, you got the time, you helped everybody deal with their flights to get into where they're going, whatever. I mean, this is like for an expedition, right? It's not the same as every photo shoot or anything. But then once you get on the bike and I'm doing the trip, I'm documenting the thing, I have to go back into creativity mode. And that can be really rough. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, it's hard to go from like, okay, planning, procedure, producing Chris to like trying to be the artist. And sometimes I feel like that's where I fail the most, is the art part. Because I get out there and I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to start to think creatively. And like, oh, this is a shot right here. And oh, that's another shot. And it's really tough. It's really challenging.
Yeah. On top of that, you've forgotten a third leg, which is the athletic part of it. Right. So, I mean, you're sitting, and we've all been in the planning stage. Seth and I run some trips, or you're planning. You're very similar. Where's our ride? Where's our stay? What are we doing? What's for dinner? And you're staring at a computer on your butt for hours at a time. And then to say like, wait, I have to be in shape for this also. And I have to know my gear, and I have to know how to inflate a kayak and deflate it and pack stuff, and like that whole aspect of it too. And then I think on top of that, that's where I was getting anxiety watching it, is just like you're flowing and now you got to stop for like a shot. Like that's, to me, maybe the missing link, where sometimes I'm like, you know what, the camera's not coming on this expedition because it's too much.
Totally.
And it's impressive.
It's why I often, when I'm on trips like that, all I'm thinking about is, okay, am I willing to sacrifice quality of shot for like good composition, or willingness to take the camera out? Because oftentimes if I want to bring the 8K, the 6K, the 4K monster or whatever, which is impossible, like you're going to get less shots, but the shots you get will be higher quality. Well, I don't want a 3-minute film. I want a 20-minute film.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to be willing to take my camera out all the time, I need it to be able to fit in here, because I need to be riding my bike, grab it, set it up, put the brakes on, shoot, move on. Like, I'm not putting down a tripod, never, nothing like that. So I'm thinking really acutely around what device is going to give me what look, and then that determines what camera I'll bring. So like on the Forgotten Coast, which is rad, it's kind of like a masterclass in like, carrying a tight kit and then trying to use that kit to do something big. I had a Sony RX100, which is like the point and shoot cam. It's a good, like, it has a really good range. It's like to 120. So on a crop sensor, that's like being able to shoot almost at 200, right? Or like 180. So I had this compressed camera, right? And it was also my like primary stills camera. And then I had an iPhone, which shot 4K, right? And obviously it doesn't have a shallow depth of field at all. But I didn't really prioritize that. I didn't really care about that. My phone was set up, and then I had a GoPro. And the GoPro is kind of the POV, kind of the in the water stuff. And then the Sony was more of like the proper footage that I was trying to shoot. And then the phone was just like found moments in like, when we're at a shelter or a hut, or somebody's having to fix a bike, or something really crappy is happening. And then again, on that trip, we had a crew that kind of helped out with like some drone shots and some of this and some of that. And so that did, allow us to get a few more intimate moments.
Yeah, and a common theme we have here is I think people tend to get stuck with, I'll make that movie when I can afford the Sony FX3. Then I'll do it, or when I get that new piece of glass, like then I'll get serious about this. And to see that film and hear that list of equipment as a huge part of it, I think again should be eye-opening to people. Is the narrative, the story, the entire lineup is what you need. Reign supreme than having the best camera. Because if you don't have that part, then it doesn't matter how pretty it is.
Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting is that it's often that best camera, which is the one you're willing to pull out, right? The best camera to me isn't the one you have deep in your backpack at the bottom of everything, where you abhor the idea of stopping to grab it. Like, the best camera is the one where you're like, oh, it's in my pocket, I'm going to pull this out and shoot. And that's why I look back at my iPhone photos, and those are my fondest memories, because they weren't something serious. It was just like, I wanted to, keep this one for me. But I was honestly, I was a bit concerned when we made that film, because I've been a big advocate for like, if you're going to shoot the film in 4K, shoot it all in 4K. If you're going to shoot all in six, try to keep consistency when it comes to camera systems.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was absolutely not that. It was like, it was GoPro, iPhone, RX100, and then we had the A7S, the A1, whatever. So we had a plethora of cameras, and being able to mix that footage together and feel like it color graded well was like a big surprise to me. Because that was always a kind of a not a rule that I live by, but something I try to be obvious of, is like, don't mix them up if you can.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
I love that question. I mean, if you polled 100 random photographers and you said, hey, what's the best camera? You're going to start listing things with the craziest specs. I love that idea of reframing it. It's the best camera is the one that you can use the most efficiently.
Yeah. And if that's film, that's what it is, a little point and shoot. Or if it's, again, if it's your Leica, great. If it's your, who knows? I think it's like about the willingness to use it.
Right? I'll tell you what it's not. It's not a huge gimbal.
No. It's a gimbal that's unstabilized or whatever it is.
You have to balance it every time. I've brought that to 3 trips and I've used it 0 times.
Never seen him use it.
Nope. I've stopped bringing it. I've learned
his luggage, so
I've learned, but that's one of those things where it's like, I think I want really
sometimes
smooth footage.
You have to show up with it though, just to look like dialed.
Yeah,
because like nobody questions you.
Yeah, you have to have it.
There was another point in the film that I wrote down. You said, "quote I'm waiting for the first thing to go wrong," as if it was just matter of fact.
Yeah.
And my question for you, with years of experience, is, how is having that confidence in knowing that things definitely will go wrong on a challenging task or project an important perspective to learn and develop? Why is that crucial to have that mentality?
I think it takes away the shock and the awe of when it does. You feel less, it's like the person, you throw something at them, they don't even flinch. And you're like, whoa, what has that dude been through, or whatever. And I think it's kind of like that, where you bring a little extra of this, you bring a little extra of that. You're a little more thoughtful about what you pack. You're a little more thoughtful about your kit. And even me, like, there's a time when I definitely have, I've ridden my bike with like a 70 to 200 and a full size body and everything. And I'm like, that was the dumbest thing I've ever done. I've taken stuff like that at the top of Mount Whitney and regretted every second of it. So a little bit of, experience goes a long way is what I'm trying to say. And I do think that, the mindset really just comes down to kind of laughing it off a little bit. Like this is just how it was supposed to be. I was supposed to fall in this creek in the middle of the winter, or I was supposed to get a flat tire on the top of a glacier and have to change it, or whatever it is, like things that, this camera was meant to break, and you kind of laugh at it, and a part of it makes you really angry, or a part of it you're kind of like, well, this is also a cool thing, because I think nowadays I'm also not the one that usually has to fix it. I'll find somebody else to fix it, and my job is to usually stay calm and keep those around me calm, especially in like a commercial photography sense, where there's a client, there's people, I'm doing a job like that. Your goal is to kind of be the one that keeps them excited, and optimistic.
How do you best do that?
Yeah. Well, I would say that having other real challenges in life help. Just having real, and again, I don't want to, I'm not trying to age myself or date myself, but I will be by saying this. But, when I grew up and I was doing the work that I was doing, what I felt was pushing the boundaries in photography and really making a name for myself, maybe 10 plus years ago or whatever. I had kids, I had 2 kids, and I was married at 21. I've been married for almost 18 years. I've been raising a son since I was 26. So while most of my friends are like just trying to, figure out how to afford that first big camera here, or like just maybe getting married or just moving in with their partner, I'm like, yeah, like the whole time there was other stuff happening. I would say that for me, that sort of drinking from the water hose of responsibility, it taught me quite a few things. And one of those things is just to be really focused on your time, how you spend your time, your responsibilities. What does it mean? Things start to mean a lot different when you're caring for somebody else, and your job isn't just for you. It makes you think about the projects differently, think about how motivated you are, like how willing are you to hustle, and I don't know, that's a mindset that I haven't lost.
Yeah, I'm curious, with a family, with increasing the numbers in the family, does that change or?
There'll be no increase. No, none of that.
That's it.
Yeah, we're
done.
I have 2 kids. I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah.
I like the hand motion.
Clip, snip, snip. But back then, as a young man getting into it, you are increasing your family, and you now have responsibilities. You now have children.
Mm-hmm.
You are an adventurer. You're climbing Mount Whitney. You are surfing in the Arctic. You are crossing rivers in Iceland. Is that who you are, and that's part of the deal, honey? Or does that shift at all with the onset of children, with the onset of family? Like, I need to hedge my bets a little bit because now there's a bigger responsibility as a whole that I'm bringing to this world.
That's such a good point. I'll try to answer that as honestly as I can, but definitely not that's part of the deal, honey, only because my wife and I grew up together. Like I went to high school with her. We dated since high school, broke up. So all I'm saying is we know each other, and she has seen the progression of me being like a humble auto mechanic in high school that was going to go to college to work at a shop, right? To being a photographer and to pursuing this career path. And in the beginning, it wasn't really about expeditions and adventures. It was about shooting surfing. And that took me further and further and further away. And it started to take me to places that were more remote and off the beaten track. And I think I took that work ethic and I applied that to the action sports world and tried to shoot a plethora of action sports. And that forces you to become fairly experienced in them. And so, yeah, I'd say that my pursuit as like an athlete or as somebody who's telling stories out there on the fringe or whatever, it kind of is born from that. And I really take taking risk with a lot of weight, and it's something that I don't mess around with, and I think about a lot. And yes, it's interesting because it's this funny thing. Like, your kids are young. Everything's complicated. Life is the most challenging it will ever be. At least for me, it was just relationship with the wife and if you're somebody who's traveling and leaving the home, like, this creates a lot of tension, and you're trying to figure out, like, well, where's my time best spent? Am I needed in the home? Is that where I should be? Am I missing out on being a dad? It's also complicated when you're good at something and you're receiving this confirmation bias that when you're doing that thing you're good at, working, that you're going to receive love and affection and admiration and money and whatever, right? So that is complicated. And I remember early, when my kids were young, a part of me did kind of want to like reel back things in and just be more thoughtful about what I was doing. And sadly, it's also interesting because by doing so, I created years of work that wasn't great, maybe I wasn't super proud of, but I was doing it because it was safe and I made money, and that was important, and I got to raise this family, and that's cool. But when I'm thinking about iconic imagery that lasts forever, or imagery that hopefully, lands on the cover of a magazine or a book or is meaningful, it's a part of my career or my portfolio, that wasn't made in those years. And it's interesting because now, fast forward 10 years, my kids are 10 and 12, and they know who I am, and they know what I care about, and they know what I love and what I'm working toward or working for or whatever. It's almost weird to me to not fulfill that role, like, this sounds crazy, but like, I would rather, be somebody who's proving to them that I'm willing to take a risk and willing to go out there and try something and do something than I would be somebody who's like, we got to play it safe and I'm going to take this job and I'll be home every day. Like, I don't know that that's going to be the inspiring figure that they need. And I want to live up to that. Something else, something bigger,
Right.
Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. It is. Everything's a trade-off, right? There's not a solution in your early 20s when you have children to say, like, there's a solution to both. I can go full at this and give my best and be available to be home and
totally
be a father. So it's like, it's that balancing act. And I've been there before. I have a 9-year-old son, and just the sort of like, am I doing the right thing by even spending an hour right now talking on a podcast versus hanging with him? But there is this mix. There is this sort of trade-off where you try to balance it and then make up the time and bring experiences into his life or their lives and have these opportunities that you probably wouldn't have if you do play it safe. So it is that constant trade-off. And I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer for any individual, but there is for a certain individual to understand where they will be most happy and most fruitful as a parent of kids. And like you said, I think for them to see a shell of their father, like he could have been this, or he was on his way to that. And I think I feel bad for him. It's
almost like that idea, though, that I've been too honest with them about what makes me happy, and they would see through it if I was like not pursuing the things that I loved and taking the risks in my career still and stuff like that, and it's a tricky one. It's not for everybody. I mean, this is not parenting 101 with Chris Burkard at all, but this is
new podcast. The parenting mindset.
I guess speaking about trade-offs, Chris, my question for you would be, what criteria needs to be met for a trade-off to make sense for you to offer your time? I guess this would speak to your why, your reasons for doing things, and also how you're choosing to allocate your time based on those things.
Honestly, great point. So to me, a trade-off what would it look like first? Because it's different for everybody. So I think a trade-off for me looks like, okay, I have people I love and care about and I want to spend time with, versus I have an opportunity, and that opportunity is going to take me away from this. Or, it's going to take me away from whatever, a sport that I love, or a place that I really enjoy being, or who knows, I had an opportunity to go on a vacation, but this job came up, right? I'm just trying to paint a picture how it might look for somebody else.
Right.
But yeah, it would have to look like, well, I'm going to put that through a filter of things, and I'm going to put that through my marketing mindset, right? And I'm going to say like, hey, is this a job that I'm going to do because it's going to pay well? Is this a job that I'm going to do because it's going to give me great exposure? Maybe the pay isn't as good. Is this a job that I'm going to do because it's with somebody I want to work with and I'm really excited to, and I don't really care what I'm getting paid, but it's worthwhile because it's going to be fun? Or is this like just dream assignment? I've always wanted to do it. I would pay my own way if I had to, right? And those they all feed a different thing, right? The monetarily thing is going to feed like the family and the need and the blah, blah, blah. And it's worthwhile because of you're paying your next mortgage. The second thing, it might be more about building a portfolio. Third thing might be more about who you're associated with. I really want to get that credit on that film. I want to get that producer credit or whatever it is. I'm going to go and edit something for free because I want to be associated with, who knows, the Jimmy Chins of the world. I don't know. And then the last thing might be something where it's, it might just be fulfilling a personal dream. So I think it has to fulfill one of those criteria. And I'm just kind of spitballing here. This isn't like, I don't have this written down. I'm not like reading a script, but I think that like, that's the general things that I would look at. There can be more, there can be less. If you make too many, it's going to be really hard to ever get anything through. But yeah, I think that everybody kind of has to figure out what that is. What is the trade-off? What's the value, the worth?
Yeah,
I think there was a second part of your question. I forgot what that was already.
I think it was, I tried to frame the question in a way that also spoke to, so you addressed the criteria. Right. I guess it also leans into, okay, when I've selected this thing, I'm giving up so much. So I'm damn well going to make sure I use my time as efficiently as possible. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious how you do that, avoid distractions, notice what's essential.
That's a scary one, because I can vividly remember, say, the first time I made a film, a bigger film, Under Arctic Sky. And awesome. I had committed to this project. It was huge. It was big for me. It really like put my name out there, and it was exciting, but I definitely had no clue how much the tour was going to ask of me and how much was required for me to get this film, so-called out there. Mm-hmm. And of course I we had it distributed. It was on Netflix, is blah, blah, but like I wanted to personally see it through, and I wanted to show it everywhere. And so what I'm getting at is that that was a huge like eye opener, because I couldn't have even guessed how much that was going to take, or the time it was going to take. So when I'm thinking about like, oh, what am I going to get out of this? Because I, had to leave, go do, walk away from, or not, be with these people. I think it's an educational process. You're never going to really, you know what I mean? Like you don't know unless you've done that thing before. So there are things that I'm still doing that I've never done before, certain
you
trips.
can't know what you don't know.
Yeah. You don't know what you don't know. And Aaron, you had mentioned, like, the training or on a trip. And I'm like, yeah, like even that, sometimes you're signing up for something, you don't really know what's required. Like the training that's required of me, that's another full-time job sometimes.
Yeah.
Literally. So you don't know what you don't know. But then I also think that, having gone down some of these roads in the past, I feel more confident knowing what it will require, or maybe that I over-delivered and I could dial it back. And maybe the next project isn't such a big one that it's like that. I'm okay with it being a little less. And I think that there's certain benchmarks things hit where I'm like, okay, this is worth more of my time. This is worth more of my time. I think the bigger question here maybe is, when do you know when to quit, right? When do you know when to pull back? Because the problem is you get these projects where you're getting like green light, red light, green light, red light. You're kind of getting these signs that you should move forward, but then a lot of signs that you should maybe stop. And I guess what I'm saying is, say you're working on that film, and then you're like, I want that next song, or I'm gonna spend more money. This thing's gonna be worth it. It's gonna pay for itself. And then it doesn't, right? So I guess knowing when to dial it back. You're working on like a book or a film or a personal project of some type. I think knowing like when is too much investment too much, and or when's it going to affect you emotionally, personally. That's sort of what that film tour was. So I didn't realize that like it was just going to make me feel crazy. I mean, spending months away from home, showing this film everywhere and doing, European tours and whatever, India, New Zealand, like it's just a lot. So I think that I filter things now through that perspective as well.
So with your new film,
yeah,
what did you learn from that? Were you able to look at the tour schedule? Was that an important piece, and say like, hey, I've done this before. Yeah. I want to make sure I feel happy about this.
Yeah. So I pretty much only toured it in the US, and, and I built the tours in the way that I like. I mean, I was doing, for example, when we were doing Under Arctic Sky, I was in a rented RV doing 5-6 cities in California. And every night we do 2 to 3 screenings. So back to back to back, like a matinee, an evening, and then a late show. Right. And I would do a slideshow, a Q&A at every single one. I mean, I was for a ride. Like I was like losing my voice.
Yeah.
Anything. Anyway. So with this film, it was different though, because I knew right away, like a small project, 20 minutes. It's not that long. It's not a 40-minute film. So even the length of time that the film plays, you kind of have to dial it back to that, to match that length of time, because you're only going to be able to entertain an audience for so long. So inevitably the film is shorter. The experience is shorter. The slideshow of the project is a little shorter. It's not as long of an event, I guess. And that being said, I was like, okay, I want to do a limited run. I think that a big part of the strategy is always like, is your project going to be something that you're going to sell to a network and it's going to make its money that way? Or is this going to be something where the only money you're going to make is from the tour? Because a lot of times touring a film is the one of the number one ways you'll make an income from doing that. You're not going to get much from the sales, especially if you don't have like a blockbuster or something crazy or a Red Bull film, right? You're going to, I'll maybe make like $2,000, $3,000 from the online sales. But the tour, it can pay like 30 grand or 40 grand or something like that.
Wow. Just rewind a bit. I think you touched on a really interesting point, is knowing when to quit, stop, or pull back. That is such a hard skill to learn. And I'm speaking from experience, especially if you consider yourself a very driven and ambitious person. That quitting word or stopping, there's this guilt that comes with it. Have you ever experienced that when you've pulled the plug, and how have you gotten over that feeling of, oh man, I didn't see this through?
Yeah. I don't know that I feel necessarily guilt in that situation, but it's more of like a failure kind of thing. You don't want to show your colors, and you don't see that maybe like this thing, like, I have an example of that. Like I worked on a film called I Am Here, which was a friend of mine on an expedition who kind of was dealing with alcoholism and stuff. And I wanted to make this film really bad. We tried to kickstart it and we couldn't raise the money. And we had a sick trailer cut and everything. And it looked so good and a great page for it, yada, yada, yada. We just couldn't raise the money. It was just, timing was off. And I think that heavier of a storyline maybe isn't as exciting to people, because it was about cycling and, friendship and abuse and alcoholism and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to interweave those things into adventure. So we, shopped it around and kept it going. And ultimately it was an exercise in learning when to say like, hey, I'm now losing money on this. I'm not seeing any of that money come back. I'm not seeing any return. I'm not seeing as many doors open as I would like. So I either need to curb it, save money, and then put money back into it later when I have some money to spend, but not keep slowly bleeding myself. And I have that perspective, obviously, but yes, learning when to say no, it's just like that's like the hardest thing about that is it's only a learned trait. Like you're only going to know when you know. Some of the other things, when looking ahead and making a decision, you can, gauge from friends, you can, check in with your peer group, but really hard to kind of know when at the end of it to be like, hey, I've made this as good as I can. And me putting $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more dollars into it is not going to improve it that much. That was always the thing, is like, if you put in that extra 10,000 into a film or into whatever, then you're like, holy cow, is it going to actually make that much back? Right. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I'm trying to filter it now, which doesn't mean you want a crappy product, but you just want to be a little more conscious of like, or I want to be a little more conscious of like, what is the return that I'll get?
Yeah. And avoiding the law of diminishing returns. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
I think maybe the antidote for people listening who maybe feel that guilt or that, I didn't see it through or I failed. I think the antidote for that is perhaps knowing that it's not wasted time because the result wasn't achieved. You still learned a ton of stuff. You mentioned your trailer cut. There was still skills learned and applied there.
Totally. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite trailers we've ever cut, actually. And my first foray into like looking into that type of narrative. And I did learn a lot. It was great.
Right.
And also looking in the mirror and just being honest with yourself, I think is important, and saying like, hey, I've pulled the plug on the last 10 projects. What's going on?
Yeah, totally.
And just having an honest sort of conversation with the whys around things. And are my eyes bigger than my stomach here? Like why am I biting off too much that I can chew? Like what's going on that I'm not following this through? Do I not have a good team around me? Do I not have the skills? How am I getting these leads and then dropping them? Yeah. So I think sort of evaluating those things is definitely important.
And I would also just say that like it is a matter of kind of, I guess, knowing when the right time is there to like bring something on, and kind of gauging, like, I guess you say when I say the words, I want to make a film, all I'm thinking about is, oh man, that's like this 6 months of work. You know what I mean? Like I have a perspective of the time commitment, and it makes me fearful to embrace something like that fully, to commit to it. Right. Because I'm aware highly of the amount of time that it will commit. And I think that one of the issues, just to go back to this, cause it's such a good thought, is when it's hard to learn to like say no. Sometimes for me, and maybe some other people in my shoes, you also feel a little ashamed when you go, your next project is something smaller. You always want the next project to be bigger. How do you outdo yourself? Because that's what the world expects. Every time I've ever been in an event ever, there's always the question of like, what's next? Where are you going to be in 10 years? And I always laugh because I'm like, it's as if it's not enough that I'm happy and I love what I'm doing now. And like, dude, I am at the ceiling. Like, I love my job. This is epic. If I was having a podcast like this, doing a podcast like this in 5 years, I'd be stoked. Like, I don't need to like do the next thing, like, so I think that there is a little bit of like personal shame sometimes when your like next project doesn't outdo the last one, you know?
Have you ever felt that way personally? You mentioned people expect, what's your next project is essentially implying, is it going to be bigger? Have you ever felt it needs to be bigger?
100%. Yeah. I'm literally sharing all this from experience. Like I have felt that. I'm like, oh man, but this one's not like, you know, like if we say it's going to be like this big epic thing and people are expecting that, but they get this, like, what does that mean? You know? So yeah, like it's different,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that, it is
the dragon.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of a mirror image of imposter syndrome. Instead of thinking like, oh, I shouldn't be here, or I don't deserve to be here. Now it's like
the imposter is me, and I'm impostering myself.
Yeah. I'm the person that should be there. Like I should up it a little bit more. So it's like this reverse sort of guilt or shame of like, I got to keep this going. Like I have a name.
It's self-induced though. Like that's what's funny about it. Like nobody actually expects, nobody needs that, you know, like in fact, you know, my favorite projects have been smaller, shorter ones that were free, you know, and that's like something that, you know, was available to everybody. Those were the ones that actually like turned out the best. So yeah, I think it's like, it's a self-induced thing, I guess is what I'm saying.
A question I have is, you know, we've talked a lot, I guess we're touching on purpose here and, you know, that why we speak a lot about that, having a why for doing things. I'm curious if having an emotionally compelling reason or a why is always in the back of your mind when choosing to do something, or if there's something to be said for just doing cool, fun stuff without purpose.
I mean, I guess I would say like, where does cool, fun stuff come from? Right? Like it seems like it originates from a desire. And then that desire would, if you pull that thread, it's going to like reveal something else, you know, that to me, I guess all I'm saying is that I think purpose is in everything. Sorry. It permeates everything. And it's a part of, kind of all that we do and all that we are, regardless if we're just doing something for fun or we're doing something to make like money and it's a pure, you know, job type of thing. I think that purpose can still occupy both those spaces.
Yeah, I guess that begs the question then, would desiring or wanting to do something be synonymous with purpose, or are those two distinct things?
Yeah, I mean, is purpose enough, right? Or is desire, is playfulness enough? Yeah, I think so. You know, I remember a friend of mine, Keith Lazinski, photographer, great guy. He once he was speaking and he had said, you know, in the beginning, every photographer, you know, they replicate, they copy, they replicate, they copy, they try to make their own thing. It stinks. They copy again. Like it's just that's the process. Like that's how it kind of goes. And so, and then eventually you find your own thing. You land on your own thing and your own 2 feet. And so I would say that like, it's important to do both, but I think that even if we're going out there because we saw a picture, we just want to go recreate it, or we are inspired to play with our cameras. Like I like this idea that play should be involved in everything. And so to kind of come back to that, like, I really hope that there doesn't have to be a definitive reason behind why we pick up a camera and why we go shoot, or why we find joy in trying to give ourselves a photo essay or go, you know, experiment with something. It's the same thing with a bicycle, right? And this is kind of silly analogy, but on the Forgotten Coast, we're riding on these beaches. There is no road. There's no trail. There's just an open beach. You can go anywhere you want. You can go left, you can go right, you can go up that sand dune. And I've always thought about this, like when the only metric for success on a bike as an adult is speed. Like that's what it is, bike races. So it's about how fast do you go, right? That's the only metric for success. What happened when we used to measure things in just joy, like just how fun it was? So bringing that back to the photography question of like, you know, is it enough to just go out and kind of, you know, do something for the fun of it? Or I think that's a crucial thing. Like go out with the act of just wanting to have joy. That's it. Nothing else. That's
something I've been writing recently in my journal logs, is trying to transition from success being a performance-based thing to you showed up, or you enjoyed this, you had fun, it put a smile on your face, you had a great conversation today. Stuff like that. So it's perfect timing in my life.
That's like super important though too.
Yeah.
Is that we train ourselves to kind of measure things in certain ways, and that's been tough for me, because I've given in sometimes to like measuring myself with others, or just not being proud of my work because it didn't make that much, or it didn't sell that well, or whatever it was, right? And it's not the metric, right? It's like it really isn't.
How badly do you think socials has amplified this, if at all?
Yeah, I do think a lot, because we just go on there and compare, and measure,
Right.
and compare and measure and measure and compare. And I think that's, usually when I'm left up to my own devices, like that's sometimes what I find. I'm like, oh man, I wish I was doing that. Wish I was doing that. Wish I was creating that, whatever. But then I realized like, well, the point of that is that channel is to have real interaction.
Right.
And then I'll go on there and I'll have an interaction with somebody. And then I feel like my faith is restored. So a little bit. So I'm like,
back to going to success. That's a successful social media outing now, as opposed to something else. It's, hey, I had a great conversation, or I got inspired. That's a win for the day.
Exactly. Or somebody made me laugh. I think about that a lot. Like I'm I obviously am big on DMs. It's like big part of, it's like really what I care about. I care about connecting with people. I like the comments on a post or what I share. That's cool. Like I like to inform people. I see that as like the bulletin board, but then the DMs to me, like that's where it goes down. Like I like to
water cooler.
Yeah. It's funny. Like people write jokes and like I'll share something, and there's times where I'm like, dude, I'm literally laughing out loud. Thank you. Like that was sick. And that's like a gift. That really is like somebody made you laugh. Like,
right.
Dude, that's a big thing,
Yeah. I think it sounds so obvious, but I think it's such an important point that I was having this discussion about music, and maybe we could relate and set up a long-winded analogy, but with Spotify,
I'm good on those, bro. I'm good.
Yeah. If I'm making a great album and I put it on Spotify, but I'm not willing to connect, I'm not willing to go on tour, I'm not willing to practice, I'm not willing to do, I'm not going to make a lot of money. We all have heard like the Spotify gets everything, the artists get nothing. I think live music is really coming back. I mean, I can't remember a time where every time I open up my email, a band I love is like, they're in town. It's just constant. But I think the shift is, we have to go out there and connect now. We have to practice. We have to go do our craft. We have to interact with the audience. We have to make eye contact. And the better you are at that on stage, the better you are at connecting. And me going to a venue and feeling like the guy was singing or playing towards me versus just through earphones or in my car makes me a lifelong fan. And I think
love that
for you, it's got to be one of your successes. And I don't know if you've noticed it or it's just your natural thing is, but with a huge following, making films, you're responding to DMs, you're jumping on a podcast, you're going on Clubhouse, which is just like a flash in the pan sort of app, but you're like, let's talk to people. And multiple times, if I remember at the time. But that sort of strength, it's not just about creating art. It's not just about having a narrative. It's not just about putting out a fancy reel. To have success commercially, artistically, there has to be an element of networking. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And is there anything people can do to work on that? Like, what would you say that someone that struggles with that sort of interpersonal communication?
That's such a good point. That's a great question.
What little pushes could we give to say like, hey, try this?
I mean, finding general interest is always like that's like goes back to How to Win Friends and Influence People, book, that type of thing is like, just find general interests. When I'm, if I'm in person with people, I'm pretty good to identify like, oh, that person's wearing this kind of shoes, that kind of hat, they're into this, blah, blah, blah. Well, I've got I'm sure there's a part of me, there's a story, there's a way or person or something I know that I might be able to connect this person, through that experience or whatever. And I just look for ways to identify. Like, I think you genuinely do have to be a people person. That does help. And it does help to not only find success, but when you're on set as a photographer, shooting, you need to be able to potentially lead a group of people. You know, if you want to be like, that's one of the unwritten laws of like, you know, taking your work to a commercial level and having to kind of work with a crew is like you're directing a crew and they're waiting on you, and you're kind of having to give clear directions, and you're having to, you know, be cheerful and amidst stress. You kind of got to, you know, keep a straight face or whatever. But yeah, connecting with people, being a people person, remembering names, caring about them, you know, like treating everybody with respect and you know, whatever your truths are around that. I do think that makes a big difference. And I would say, like, you know, subtle ways to improve upon it. Really, there's so many books about it. I would not even be able
to ask you about this.
Yeah. I mean, I would say
Carnegie's How to Influence Friends and How to Win Friends and Influence People. I was going to ask you, what other resources what other books do you like? What other resources do you dig into?
Essentialism is one of my favorite books.
McEwen, we've talked about this the last like 10 episodes.
Yeah. Both his books are exceptional. And he, you know, he is more helping people to kind of get to their why. That's literally what he does for a living. It's a great book. I've recommended it 100 times. There's Grit by Angela Duckworth. That's a great book too. GRIT. That one's awesome. And then there's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F is a great book too. I think it's Mark Manson. I can't remember who wrote that, but that one's really good. I mean, I've got a whole library and there's a lot of them, and I tend to like go back through. I also really love The Alchemist. That's a book that's like really meaningful to me. And I've read it probably 6 times or something like that. So
what have you taken away the most from the concept of essentialism? I actually have in my notes. One of my questions was, do you make decisions based on, is this a 9 out of 10 on the importance scale?
Which is, you know, I mean, the thing I took away the most from essentialism, hands down, was learning to say no is actually learning to say yes to what you want. Yeah. I mean, I don't even want to expand upon that, because I think that it's just so good as it is, but that is the truth that I was like, this is the kernel. I'm taking this one. And I've applied that to my life a lot.
Yeah. I really liked in that too. If you don't prioritize your life, somebody else will.
Oh, that's a heavy one. That one kind of hits you deeply though. You're like, oh,
and that stems with that goes hand in hand with people pleasing, wanting to say yes to everybody. And it's just, it gets to a point where like, am I living my life or somebody else's?
Yeah. And I've lived that MO before, you know, and it's not a great one. So,
how so?
I'm just, you know, as somebody who kind of grew up in that family dynamic and, you know, wanted to be a people pleaser, you know, I definitely feel like I've at times maybe given of my personal time or, you know, kind of spent too much energy trying to make people happy that just aren't happy and weren't meant to be happy, whether it be, you know, athletes I worked with or people that, you know, clients I worked with that like were unsavory, and just, you know, you know, take it personally. You know, a lot of times you think it's a you thing, and sometimes it's an other people thing. And yeah, I think that people pleasing mentality is not great when it's combined with somebody who's like a high achiever.
Right.
Just, you know, I think can be a deadly cocktail, but yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Moving into a bit of marketing and commercial photography and the state of social media, I found this as a creator, this sort of argument that happens in my brain where I go, I have a good idea for this shoot. And then I go, but that's not going to do well.
Right.
And
that's rough.
I'm curious what you find more paramount. I do feel like we're at a point where I think companies are getting into the idea or coming out from underwater in the sense of, all right, views aren't everything. It's kind of like where do those views turn into stuff? And are we connecting with the right people that like the right stuff? So if we're just going to make a funny video of, you know, someone getting kicked in the nuts because it's going to get 4 million views, is that going to sell our jacket?
Right.
And so the question becomes, when creators are trying to create and they get stuck in this sort of, I want to create something that gets a lot of views so I can prove that one metric to them. Like, look, my thing got 1 million views. Mm-hmm. That's great. But do you feel like we're a little bit lost and like swimming and kind of suffocating with what are we looking at actually? And what's everyone trying to actually accomplish here?
Yeah. And I would say that totally is dependent. That answer would depend upon if this is a branded piece of content that is, or not a branded piece of content, but something that you're going out to do for a brand, right? And the objective is for the brand, or if this is for me personally, right? If it's for me personally, I really, really try to stay away from anything that I feel like is some clickbaity thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to like stretch the mountains in my video and throw it on the internet in a reel or do things like that. I don't need to like, replay the last, 10 of my best images like 100 times and, whatever. So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to really like, who's it for and what's the purpose? A lot of times, yeah, like there's a need to hit some algorithmic, whatever, the algorithm roulette or whatever it is, and get something that goes viral and try to spread the word, but for me personally, I don't know that I'm like really trying to achieve that. I'd rather, because the thing that's weird is if it does go and viral and gets 1 million views, those aren't like core consumers, those aren't necessarily people that you even care about. They might be people who tapped on something. It doesn't mean they're following you at all.
Right.
Like it doesn't actually mean that you're moving a product or you're making more for your life or you're creating an income. It doesn't by any of those metrics that we're measuring or whatever filters, like it's not hitting those marks. So a number doesn't mean anything to me personally. I know full well that, the economy of social media is just time. It's all time based, right? So it's how much time is any one person spending on your piece of content, right? How much time are they looking at it? How much time are they watching it? And that time is then what is calibrated as valuable. And that is that's what the algorithm moves towards. And sadly, the stuff that we spend the most time on is what enrages us. And so this idea of like rage bait, has become its own thing. And it just is what it is. Like human beings, when Instagram was a photo sharing app, that's what people don't really realize. Like when it was that's when it was incredible. But that's so long ago, so long ago, I mean, when it became a place where news and things like that and brands, instead like before all of that when it was something else, that's when it was for me different, So yeah, I would say like, I know that I veered way off your question.
No, that's fine.
I feel like in some capacity, those things are all pertinent and they're relevant. And I do think that it just kind of depends, really on what is the end goal and how do we measure that? I would say something for me, for my career and life that's been really helpful when talking to brands or pitching clients or doing anything is always kind of stating or trying to identify what is the end goal of this. Like, how would you, client, whatever, define, or me, maybe I'm asking myself, what do we define success as in this situation? And if we can figure that out, then we have like a marker, and that can be our GPS point. And now I've got to draw a roadmap from where we are now here to get there. And so that idea of being able to identify what a successful partnership looks like, what a successful shoot looks like, what a successful thing looks like, you can draw a roadmap. Without it, you can't.
Yeah. And so, that's a really important question, I think, to not be scared to ask.
It's super. The problem is that 8 times out of 10, I get like yeah, cool, we'll circle back. And then I never hear anything ever. And this is an issue because, I know I'm veering way out in left field here, but this is important to me. But this is an issue because then people don't want to be held accountable, right? Nobody wants to be held accountable for the project if it doesn't fail or if it doesn't work out, right? Doesn't fail sounds or really like bad, but if it doesn't work out, right? There's someone to blame. And people aren't as bold as they used to be. I remember going into client meetings and, being this young and upcoming photographer and having a crazy wild idea that, we're going to do. And it was exciting and, the legal department might be pissed off, but it's okay. And so anyway, people just nowadays, it feels like less risks are taken and people don't want to be have the finger pointed at them, so they kind of want to leave it open-ended. And if you leave it open-ended, then you can blame anybody. And so anyway, I really try, point being, to work backwards from the end goal. And I think that, to answer your question, I would filter those two situations backwards from the end goal and be like, well, what is my goal here? Is it just to put out something personal for me? I don't care who it's for. It's because I'm proud of it. Or is this because I need to push something, promote something? But I do feel like it is an archaic model to look at like the number of likes and think that that's what creates value, or all content has to be something that's like fast hitting, and that just feels really gross in some way.
Yeah. Well said. I think, Seth, it's the first time you're outnumbered by two people that just go like into the
convergence. You diverge so hard that you converge, you come back
into the ether. Seth, no, it's great.
I love
tangents. Seth's just a master over the last 3 years with me. Just like, let's bring it back.
I bring my mental fishing rod and
he's caught me a few times.
Reel him in, let him go.
He's caught me a few times.
I found myself in this scenario a couple times, Chris, where you get a boilerplate answer. Let's say, let's circle back, or something along those lines. And a part of you knows that the odds of circling back are very unlikely because things get lost in bureaucracy, etc.
Yeah.
Obviously, their desired outcome is important, but I've often found myself knowing that, okay, it's unlikely that we're going to circle back. I should push an idea that I have just to get things moving and to take charge. How do you find that balance?
Totally. So that's often what has to happen, right?
Right.
That's the path of least resistance, is that you then come up with the idea and you kind of put it in front of them, you sell them on it. But what sucks is like, it's still that kind of like plausible deniability situation, where nobody ever told you what they really wanted. So you just then had to kind of like play marketing for them and kind of figure it out.
Right.
And it's like, you have to use this weird, like, you're sort of interviewing them and you're kind of probing them and I agree that is probably what happens. Put an idea in front of them, maybe one that's not as risky as you had first hoped, or not as cool, but it's going to work, and whatever.
Yeah.
So you kind of play it safe a little bit, I find. And that's sort of the issue we're seeing a lot, is the content's so homogenized because everybody just wants to play it safe.
Yeah. I don't know if this is great advice, and maybe not on large scale for giant projects, but I've found myself a couple times being like, I think this is a great idea. I will take the blame for it if it doesn't pan out, just so that we do it. Just so that we do something.
Yeah.
If in the sense of, if this doesn't work out, it's not a huge loss. Like, I'm not getting sued, but I'm okay taking the heat if it's just the outcome doesn't hit it. And then also, like, for my personality, it puts a little bit of a fire underneath me to, let's make this work.
Yeah. Let's make this sick. I love that. I agree.
Yeah.
If you take the responsibility away from people in a low stakes environment, maybe you up the chance of the project or the marketing campaign, what have you, maybe you up the chances of that happening. Just a thought.
Yeah. I think that like that keyword that you said, like low consequences situation.
Yeah.
Like that's the best. That's really where art can thrive and creativity can thrive, because I feel like one of the things that I've thought about over the years, having had a lot of people, assistants work for me or interns, probably 20, 30 over the past, I don't know, 16 years, something like that, is when I'm trying to bring somebody through the ranks from being like a lowly, person who's helping me ship books or pack for trips or whatever, to like a photo assistant or whatever it is. I'm trying to put them in situations where it is low consequence, where they can be risky, where they can really play with the camera. And I'm the one, shooting, because if we're shooting on a job together, I'll be the one who's shooting all like the key art and the stuff that we need to do. And they just get to go and like snipe from some fun angle, right? Take the risk, play. And I offer that because that is what teaches them how to like exercise that muscle. I've learned that if you put somebody right into a rigid place and you're like, okay, you're going to assist me before, like you're going to do exactly what I'm going to tell you. You're going to, shoot at this, blah, blah. That's cool. And that works for some people. And I know most photographers might operate that way, as like, they're just a mimic of you. But I'm like, no, I want to see what this person does when they're given creative freedom. because I want to see how creative they can be. I don't want a mimic of me. I want somebody who is assisting in this situation. Right.
Yeah.
And that's been really cool. That's a really cool exercise to do and to kind of, support and bring up people. And I've really been able to witness a handful of folks just like blossom from that.
No doubt. It's clear that you value creative autonomy and boldness, people being bold and taking creative chances. I'm getting that vibe. My question for you in terms of photo assistance is what's been the common soft skill, personality trait, separate from creative skill, that has made your assistants stand out positively to you?
Excellent question. There was one old, commercial photographer who had said this before, and it really struck me. They were like, a good assistant is the person who knows what you need before you need it. And that's the truth. Somebody who's really good, they know what you need before you need it. You reach over to them and you're like, oh man, did you see my water bottle in the car? They're like, oh, yep, I did. I grabbed it for you. It's right by your bed. And you're like, oh dude, thank you. Like, just like little shit like that. Like, it's not about like, oh, can you grab me this lens? And maybe they grab the wrong lens and it takes 5 seconds to get the other one. Who cares? Like that's not a big deal to me.
Right.
I'd rather have somebody that is a good hang and a good conversationalist. Like I need to have a good conversationalist because I think, decompressing after a shoot is a big deal, or after a project or after an expedition. I want to be able to chat with somebody and like have similar interests. I need somebody who is like physically fit and somebody who is able to keep up. I'm not necessarily thinking that we need to be on equal terms, but like just somebody who prioritizes that. And then, that trait really of just like knowing what you need for you. Because you're going to spend more time with this person sometimes than your own family, right? In a month maybe or whatever. At least on some of the projects I've done where it's been like that. And not going to lie, I've probably had to share a bed with most of the people that I've worked with also just because, we're in a boat somewhere and wherever we are and it's tight quarters or, shared hotel from some, cheap gig or something like that. And that's just the truth. And like, if a person can't hang in that situation, I don't think they're going to vibe with me well.
Yeah.
Rewinding way back to the start of our conversation, you had mentioned there was a period in your life where you just weren't making, I think your words were iconic, meaningful imagery. Not to go into that. I want to know what is iconic, meaningful, powerful imagery to you that, is legacy portfolio, like you're in your legacy portfolio.
It's also, it's funny because there's probably images I've shot in the last couple of years that are maybe technically better and or might have made me more money, I guess I'd say. But like, for example, like, a photo of somebody holding an iPad that I might have shot for Apple or something like that. Like, like that photo probably made me more money. Right. But I really try to filter like what is an iconic image? What's a career worthy image? What's your portfolio photo? Is like, what are the images that support each other that really show what represents you? It's not about my range. I don't set, my portfolio, like my 10 best iconic images. There's not like a single commercial photo in there. There's nobody holding a bottle of something or whatever. It's like, these are the images that define who I am as a person, and it's mostly like early Arctic surf images, photographs that are something about, an image that feels resonant with me as a photographer. And almost like if the world, and for what it's worth, like this is just something that I've thought about a lot, is like, if the world finds just 10 images of yours, what would they want to see long after you're gone?
Great question.
Somebody opens a book and it's a page on whatever, Seth Macy, right? It's like,
what do you post about that? Because I'd like to think about that.
Like, what do you want them to see in that page? You get one page in a book. That's it. That's it.
Low angled selfies.
Yeah.
iPhone front of camera, double chin
selfies.
That is a great question. We're not trying to make take a hard left there with comedy. No, that's a great question. That's something I'm going to think about when we get off this recording for sure. And I think people listening should as well.
I have a good question. It's kind of, well, I patted myself on the back.
Could be horrible.
But by good question, I mean, I think it's fun. A fun question. I usually play this game where it's like, what bands of the past, if they came out today, would be famous and make it? And some are easier than others. And some are up to debate.
Oh dear.
Right. But we can do the music thing, but I have a question. Timing is a lot of everything. You came out at a certain time, and if you started today as a 20-year-old, what skills then do you think would help you to succeed now? And do you think it is a different ball game, but what do you think you would do differently to have the push that you've had? Or, I mean, if you wanted to be honest or felt like it, that timing is a lot of it and luck is a lot of it. And the timing of social media and the things that I got into really did help me. And today's a different ball game.
So the question is, what would I do now to do it? How would I start my career now to do what I'm doing now?
Do you think you would be as successful if you started now? And if yes, what skills would push you through no matter what? What cream would rise to the top?
100%. I 100% would be as successful. Who knows if I would be a photographer?
Yeah.
See, that's the difference, right? It's like there's certain people who are just going to be good at things because they care about those things and they work for them and they work hard for them, or they practice them, right? And they respect them. And I think that the reality is, maybe when I started my career, I thought that like photography was a linear path. But for me, it was never about success or fame or making money. I just grew up in a really small town and I wanted to get out of that town. I wanted to see the world. That was the origin, right? It wasn't like I fear anybody starting a career now or getting on social media now being like, I want to do this to make money. Like, I just don't think that that's ever been the right mindset, even when there was an opportunity to do so, or whatever. I just don't think that that's the mindset. So anybody I know who does it authentically and who lives a life like this, it's like, they don't care about those. They didn't care about those types of things in the beginning. I can't speak to them now. But for me, I think that what I've realized is, being a photographer and having that be your only skill makes you feel so limited. And so over the years, I've really tried to hone my voice to be a speaker and somebody who can advocate for my own stories and tell my own stories and entertain people. I've worked, at being a host. And so I've guided and toured and hosted shows and whatnot. And beyond that, there's a bunch of other kind of pillars of my business with workshops and other things. So all I'm saying is that there are different, I think, hats we can wear and different things that entertain us and keep us excited and keep us joyous. And I mean, these days, even the idea of, having been a historian would be rad. I've always loved I love geology. I've loved, history. I think like that would have been a cool career path. It's just a funny thing. Mostly geology is history. When history coincides with geology, I'm excited, but I love rocks and I love studying rocks. I love obviously volcanoes and just the understanding understanding the landscapes that I'm in. So I guess what I'm saying is like the older I get, the less likely I'd even want to do what I did early in my life. It's like hilarious because the more I go this direction, I'm like, well, that was cool, but that's like version 1. And I don't even know if the fastest way to get to where I am now was to do that.
Interesting. I think what you're saying is that success, I'm doing quote fingers for people who can't see, is just a byproduct of really digging into something that you care and are interested in. And your point about getting into this for making money is so interesting. I mean, you can make way more just doing something else. You could go be an investment banker or something, or learn how to trade futures or something wacky like that. I do want to ask you, because you're an excellent speaker, you're very articulate. That's a skill. That's a skill that comes just with repetition, with speaking, with doing podcasts, with doing seminars, with doing films, etc.
Of course.
How else have you worked that skill to a point where you're avoiding filler words, you're able to structure concept to dictation, word of mouth, saying the proper things. Are there other resources beyond just repetition that have helped you excel at that skill? Because our language and the way we communicate is so important, written and orally, because it's how we convey what we're trying to get across to companies we're trying to pitch, to friends, to relationships. It's really one of the cornerstones of...
It is. It's the cornerstone of all like business and...
Yeah, I'll let you speak on this.
I mean, all I would say, you asked about like, how can you work it out? How can you work it, right? How can you work it like a muscle? Can you train it? Is it something you're practicing? Are you going out, and the answer is, yeah, you are, but you need to look at it in a different way. I look at it like it's we're all just comedians and this is our bit, right? It's a bit. Like you get on a call and you're going to pitch an idea. It's a bit. You're going to get up on stage and you're going to share your 10 best photos with some funny stories in between and some moments of, laughter and whatever. All you really need is self-confidence and then the bit. The bit is just basically where you practice and what you try to do, which, being on a podcast is not a great, reflection upon what it's like to public speak, but what you try to do is you try to refine it down to just the finite amount of words that you need, just a few, right? So the stories are tighter, the jokes are quicker, everything is a little bit more tuned in. And that's kind of how I think a good presentation or public speaking thing goes. It's like, it doesn't have to be fast paced and intense and talking a million miles a minute. It can be slow, delivered well with execution. Right. And I do know full well that it just, the more repetition you do, the better. Nowadays, I feel like it's kind of a bit of a muscle that's been really worked out. And so I feel pretty comfortable jumping up and diving right into a story and kind of knowing the points, and when you have images to guide you, it really helps. That's the one thing is like, as a photographer, if you have photographs, you can be like, oh yeah. And so you can even describe the photo for a second or whatever it is, let your mind reset and then dive into this other, but what you don't see is blank, and then you click the slide and then it's something crazy or whatever. So it can be a bit, and the images and the video can work as like your, pieces, finding that rhythm. And I think that that's kind of part of it, right? Is really working through it. And yeah, it'll be painful at first for sure.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned prior to me asking this question was your interests diverge. And this is something I've thought a lot about in the sense of I've tried to kill my identity in the sense of I feel like we can get wrapped up in saying I am a photographer and staying in a lane as opposed to I'm so many other things. I am a surfer. I am a filmmaker. I'm a marketer. I'm a whatever. Have you felt like you've needed to shed an identity before so that you can freely explore into other territory?
Yeah. I don't.
That's the best way I can phrase the question.
No, that's like a beautiful, you said it in like a very poetic way at the end. Like, am I going to like, shed this chrysalis and become the butterfly or whatever?
Well, because we are constantly changing, right? And I mean, I feel like I've been doing photography for 10 years. I'm a photographer. Maybe you like hate it. No, I'm not speaking to you. I'm saying you in general, somebody listening.
I
it can be so hard to change lanes and just, I
grew up around a lot of lifers. I would go to the beach as a surf photographer and I'd see dudes who have been doing it for 40 years, longer than I've been alive. And I'm like, wow, they found their thing. That's rad. Nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. But to me, I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to be there has to be something else. This is fun, but this isn't everything. And so I got scared of that. And I really tried to think about, okay, well, if photography will take me this far, then what will being an author do? And then what will being a speaker do? And then what will, giving a TED talk do or whatever it is. Like, it's just, you're looking at levels. And what's cool is like, yeah, I've kind of drugged the photography career along with me. But to me, I feel like that's like one of the most minimal offerings. There's so many other better photographers than me out there that are really talented and awesome. But I do think that the thing is the stories take the photography further and this takes this. And, when you're trying to bring in what and what you've experienced, working in working in this industry now and sharing that with brands and consulting, and you start to wear a bunch of different hats, and it's fun. Like, it becomes fun because you're not limited by just one outlet.
Yeah.
And
It becomes,
and we go ahead.
I'm not Chris Burkard, the photographer. I'm Chris.
Yeah,
and
just
all these levels, as you call them, are a means for self-discovery in the story of your life, essentially.
Yeah,
here's my umbrella.
Bunch of hats. And I also think, imagine the moment when you used photography as an outlet, like a creative outlet. Maybe life was stressful and this was fun to do. And I don't know, you were with your friends, going surfing up the coast of California, and this was your spot in this, in this group of dudes or whatever it was. So I think that when it goes from being this outlet to then being your career and you have nothing else, it's challenging. And I like to mix around. Like, one day I'm working on, a book that I'm writing for Chronicle Books. And the next day I'm working on a presentation. And then the next day, we're talking about shooting something. And I like that I get to do these different things. They keep me entertained.
Keeps it fresh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. Yeah.
What's
go
ahead, Aaron.
Well, I was going to maybe save this for the end, but
I think we're coming up on the end.
Yeah, we're coming up on the end. So you have 2 sons.
Mm-hmm.
All said and done, what messaging do you want to leave with them about Earth, nature, adventure, and beyond your sons, your following, people that will look up to you, mentorships, mentorees, young photographers that find you for the first time? What is if you can slim it down to a paragraph? I'll give you a long paragraph. Slim it down to a long paragraph.
Are you prompting him like ChatGPT?
Yeah. What do you want your sons to take with them in terms of who their dad was and what he meant to Mother Earth?
Right. That's a great question. Actually, like, part of the reason why we moved to Iceland was to show them what we cared about, and to show them that access to clean water and nature and these landscapes is not only important to me, but like, it's the most important thing. I sold my studio in California. I had an awesome production studio that was beautiful, bought it, big office with the gallery, and I sold all that because I was like, you know what, I'm going to buy land in Iceland, in a remote fjord. And I wanted to show them that, to me, that's what's important. And we bought like a kilometer of beach, basically. And it's beautiful. And I just wanted to show them, like, hey, like, this is what I want you to inherit. This is what I want to take care of, because I love these landscapes. They've given me something, so now they're going to give you something. And I'm not going to wrap up your, inheritance in my business or my whatever. Like, this is what you got. So that's how I show it to them. As far as the rest of the world, I mean, that's part of why I think leaving behind things like films or books or things like that are special, because you get a chance to leave behind what you care about most. And, I don't find myself being a particularly always somebody who wants to be an open book on social media, but I definitely really try to give and deliver to people when I'm doing a presentation, or I'm sharing my work, or I'm doing an in-person event or something like that. Like, I really go as far as I can to make sure people feel and know that it means a lot to me that they're there, and that it means that a lot of people support my work. And I think that they remember that, and it means something. And so I've had a lot of support over the years through those things, and just from touring the projects that I'm doing. And it's an important part of my life, for sure.
Awesome.
Chris Burkard, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, kind sir.
That was a great conversation. Yeah.
Chris, do you have anything you want to mention to the audience? Stuff coming out, or stuff to look out for? Or I can say, check out that documentary. It's on Apple TV.
Check it out. It's on Apple TV, and more stuff to come. I'll be heading out on a pretty rad expedition April 1st. So
cool.
That might be the next. Who knows?
Are you still picking sand out of your gear from that film?
I am, man. Yeah, I just like a week ago got my bike cleaned for the first time after that trip, and Not the first time, but like a deep clean, and they were like, dude, this thing was destroyed.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Awesome. Until next time, guys.
Take care.